Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from January 10th to the 16th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with this article out of Canada, highlighting that an Ontario University study shows CBD may offer some protection against COVID-19. I consider this a big deal, not only because it builds off of what I reported on Wednesday on how Forbes, Bloomberg, and Fortune all covered a US study that looked into two compounds found within CBD that could have similar effects, but this is another study from an entirely different location, a different country, coming up with very similar results. And so I'd say this is meaningful because science is not, this is what we tell you, you better believe it. That's not science, regardless of what anyone tries to tell you. Science is coming up with questions, testing them, and then finding the results. And so the fact that we're getting similar results out of different locations and different studies from around the world is a big deal, and hopefully it will help lead to more legitimacy around these studies so that, it gets taken seriously and we look into this more. But so just to read through, the University of Waterloo says that the study Cannabidiol and the antiviral response to SARS-CoV-2 proteins showed that the non-psychoactive compound, which is also found in the cannabis plant, appears to prime the innate immune system of cells, potentially offering protection against pathogens such as SARS-CoV-2. And so the school says its researchers discovered that CBD increases the cell's response to several key proteins produced by the coronavirus genome. It says the effect had not been discovered prior to the study. So the university says that the researchers looked at how the proteins from the genome operated in human kidney cells and healthy control cells, both with and without CBD. And so this is a bit more information on just what the study entailed, so you can pause to read it. But I was very happy to come across the study and wanted to use it to build off of what I shared on Wednesday's video, because ultimately finding the same results in different locations is building a consensus that, hey, this plant could have therapeutic benefits into fighting this, so at what point is the US government going to take it seriously? On to some other news out of states. As Colorado cannabis sales on pace to wheeze by previous record. So a little bit out of this story, new figures from the DOR showed that medical and recreational cannabis sales combined for $158.4 million in November, pushing the 2021 total to just over $2.06 billion for the year, with 1 month of sales figures left to be reported. In order for Colorado to break 2020's record of $2.19 billion in sales, dispensaries must have logged just over $130 million in sales in December. And although Colorado pot shops have crossed that mark every December since 2018 and generally see a bump in traffic during the holiday season, sales have been on a steady decline in the second half of 2021. But if in November it's been declining and they did 158.4, there's a very good chance they're going to surpass 130 million. And I will report on these numbers when they are finalized. But just to add on top of that, as Colorado is the blueprint, you want to ultimately look at Colorado as if a majority of US states do reform their laws and they do it properly and launch adult use programs, they're all going to see the same sort of effects that Colorado has, especially if they have larger populations. But Colorado earned $420 million in cannabis tax revenue last year. So just to highlight, Colorado's tax revenue total also implies that the state beat its previous record of $2.1 billion in sales, though DOR said it will release those final numbers next month. So again, the odds are very good that they're going to pass, especially based on what we saw in Illinois and Michigan, record sales there, but we'll report that when it comes. But on top of that, more than $12 billion in cannabis has been sold since legalization in 2014, just in Colorado alone, with the state collecting over $2 billion in taxes. So again, the blueprint for what positive could come out of this reform change, and more states are adopting it as we see. And so this is from Tucson Weekly, just to highlight, as Arizona cannabis sales do officially top $1.2 billion in the first 11 months of 2021. So I know I've been covering the story, various sources covering Arizona over the last few weeks, but ultimately just want to highlight that first year in, 11 months in only, they've already surpassed $1 billion, which is a big deal. Arizona cannabis sales continued on upward trajectory in 2021, with the Arizona Department of Revenue reporting more than $1.23 billion in combined cannabis sales through the first 11 months of the year. Medical sales eclipsed recreational from February through October. Adult use sales began on January 22nd, which is very strange because typically when you legalize for adult use, you'll see less on the medical side, more come to just the adult side. But in November, those numbers were almost identical, with the medical program bringing in an estimated $60.3 million, while rec sales reached $60.2. So lastly, just to add on top of this, the state collected a total of $196 million in tax revenue the first 11 months of 2021 from cannabis sales, with $44.5 million from the recreational side and $58.9 million from medical, and then $92.9 million from separate excise taxes. So again, lots of benefits for states that do finally reform their laws and get with the program. Now I wanted to share this one from our favorite Redditor of the Understanding Washington 2022 A Year Ahead. I just wanted to highlight last year, the general vibe you would get from reading these is that he was bullish. And if you read through this, it's a long one. I did read through it all, and I'm not going to end up sharing any little bit of it, but all it basically says is now he's a little bit more bearish. And so ultimately, this is just to highlight no one knows what is going to happen. And while it's very frustrating and the odds are we're not going to get federal legalization this year, I still think the odds are good that we will get some form of SAFE Plus with expungement or something like that. But again, that's just my opinion, and that's why I choose to be invested, because I'm not trying to time the market. I'd rather be invested when that happens. But as you can see, his tone has changed, which just goes to show that ultimately no one knows. So the best thing we can do as investors is follow the weekly developments, stay informed, and plan accordingly for your own personal situations and whether you think we might see a potential catalyst or not in 2022. So on to some tweets. This one comes from March 2 Millions, as many institutions are unable to invest in venture issuers. And that's one of the biggest reasons why this is a generational opportunity, or a big opportunity, because when does retail ever get the chance to get into an industry before institutions pile in? And so the Canadian Securities Exchange senior tier would not be a venture exchange, reversing that issue. Institutional investment is sorely lacking in the MSO space. It isn't the US uplist we were looking for, but it will help. And so if anyone's wondering, this is painful, we're still in a lull, we're not moving up. Yes, patience is required to be a successful investor, but this just goes off of what news was announced in December, that the Canadian Securities Exchange is trying to figure out ways to bring more liquidity to the US MSOs and allow institutions and other bigger investors to access them, which would obviously help the space. So just keep in mind, while we are still going through this little period, there are still things going on behind the scenes, and people are working at little catalysts here and there. So while the US uplisting might not be what we get right away, this could help before we end up getting there. So just wanted to share this. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about, it might be a bit confusing, but there's more information that you can grab here. So this is from Andrew George. Some people are assuming the worst, not getting SAFE for any cannabis policy reform legislation in 2022. If this is the case, we still have a backup plan anticipating the second tier exchange. And so this is from OSC and BSC, initiated a 60-day comment period from December 8th. And so you can read this below. I'm just going to share it. You can pause to read. This is the first one, and then this is the second one. So it's a little bit more information, just if you haven't watched the December video where I explain this. And so you can actually grab the full link down here if you wanted. So just wanted to, again, highlight, though, there is work going on behind the scenes that can potentially allow more liquidity and more investors to access the names of the US MSOs that trade on the Canadian Securities Exchanges. On top of that, while, again, just wanted to highlight that many people are sharing their opinions that not seeing safe banking passed until 2024. Cool, Desperado, but just keep in mind that is your opinion. And my opinion is that I think we are going to get some version of SAFE Plus. But again, I could be wrong too. So again, do your best to inform yourself and then make your own decisions. But this comes from Mark Legault. SAFE could very much be delayed until 2024. That said, let's not forget the CSE is working on a senior tier designed for MSOs to allow institutional investors and would generally reduce the amount of fuckery we're accustomed to seeing on junior exchanges. And so we just have a lot of investors preparing for SAFE to pass and many preparing for SAFE not to pass. And so just wanted to share this. I think we will get some form of cannabis legislation this year, again, coming from Andrew George, but he's sharing this quote from Steve Hawkins, Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Cannabis Council. SAFE has now reached a critical mass of bipartisan support. And I do agree. That's why I choose to be invested. But again, that's my opinion, not advice. And there's a broad base of supporters that include the American Banking Association, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, the National Association of Realtors. I'd say the wind is to our backs on SAFE, and we will get there before the session of Congress is out. And I think especially more likely is the fact that the Dems did nothing last year. And since Schumer himself stopped the simplest version of SAFE from passing that would have really only helped small business owners and minority entrepreneurs, many that likely voted for him because he promised to help them get their own start in this industry, it would just be silly for him to pass up on another golden opportunity, especially when SAFE has bipartisan support in Congress. 70+% of Americans agree with ending cannabis prohibition, and ultimately Schumer did say last year on 420 that this time next year, I hope to see cannabis decriminalized. So we want to make him eat his words. On to this one from Jungle Java. As Dan shopped for an 8th straight trading day with with some more big buys for the Advisor Shares MSOs ETF. Here are the changes made to the holdings for January 14th, 2022. We started Friday with 30.85 million and we ended the day with 20.5 million. While it's not ideal to see those numbers going down, do keep tax loss selling in mind. Although it doesn't apply to me because I only invest with my tax-friendly account, many investors use a non-tax-friendly brokerage account, and if you have any assets that produce a loss, you can actually sell it in December before the end of the year and get a credit back from the government to offset that loss. However, you do then have to wait 30 days in order to buy back in. So do keep in mind that many investors likely sold their MSOs in December, and they just have to wait for that 30-day waiting period in order to buy back. And I imagine they're very grateful to see the prices where they're at, and we will see that pick up, going forward. And so on to some others. This one, market participants Mario, Yorio, and Phil Dunoff. Just wanted to share this because that spike in MSOs, Cresco Labs and VRNO, which halted intraday, was a teaser. That 10% spike, apparently from a large call spread out to June, shows how thin these names are. He's referring to Wednesday afternoon. I'm not sure if you caught it or not. It seems like the market makers on the back end fixed the mistake, but at one point in the afternoon, I remember looking at my app and seeing that Cresco Labs and VRNO jumped 10% in about a minute, and they were immediately halted and then unhalted. So I was a bit confused. I didn't know what happened, and I really didn't find any explanation. However, I did find this tweet, not saying this is true because I don't think we necessarily know what happened, but just wanted to share this from Teminator, tactical trader, 36 years trading experience. I learned what happened to several of the MSO cannabis stocks yesterday when they spiked. So again, this could have happened, might not be the explanation, but it adds a bit of conviction to our thesis. A certain broker had real buy orders for those names, but the algo bought them all at once instead of over several days. And so the real orders were on Jushi, Columbia Care, VRNO, and Cresco Labs. So just wanted to share that as it was very interesting if you missed it, but again, highlights how much of a coiled spring these companies actually are. We're just waiting for capital to come back into the space. Well, this one comes from Johnny Stocks. Just wanted to highlight this. Looking at this chart, figure number 2, national drug-involved overdose deaths, numbers among all ages 1999 to 2019. The leader, synthetic opioids other than methadone. We've got psychostimulants with abuse potential, primarily methamphetamine, cocaine, prescription opioids, natural and semi-synthetic opioids and methadone, heroin, benzodiazepines, and antidepressants. Where's cannabis on this list? Oh yeah, because it's never killed anybody. And that's another thing that gives me so much conviction. And as someone that likes to think for myself, and I imagine you are too if you found my channel and are watching these videos, we can look at the data objectively and be like, yo, DEA, you've been wrong for a very long time. And the longer it takes you to, admit your incompetence of the past, that you've approved all these opioids that have accounted for the highest number of overdose deaths, followed by synthetic opioids, yet it's taken you 50 years to deschedule the damn cannabis plant. Gosh, it makes you frustrated, but also very happy that we're getting closer to the day that cannabis is finally going to be shed in the right light and get the respect it deserves. And then on to this last one from Canna Investments. This is from Echelons, their key markets in 2022 that they're watching. We've got Connecticut for adult use sales starting, Minnesota, flower edibles introduced, New Jersey, adult use sales starting, New York, flower introduced, Ohio, retail count going 2x and grow capacity limits increased, and Virginia with flower being introduced. Plus New Mexico, actually. They'll be launching their adult use program on April 1st, 2022, but because they've got such a small market and population, seems like all the MSOs just skipped. So that's actually a great place for small business owners and minority entrepreneurs to get a head start. But just wanted to share this. So key markets to watch, reasons to watch, and it has all the MSOs that actually have a footprint that might benefit from these incoming changes. But do keep in mind, Connecticut's likely not going to launch till the end of this year. New York, even if we get lucky, it's going to be the end of this year. And so it's going to take some time for even these changes. New Jersey is supposed to launch in February, could take longer. But just to relay, cannabis sales, their 2021 estimates in the billions versus their cannabis sales 2025 estimate in the billions. So just a cool visual, another way to interpret this information. On to this one from MJ Biz Daily. As cannabis concentrate sales up 40% as more consumers turn to the product category. So this basically just shows in different markets, consumers are getting more curious and trying different cannabis products, which is good to see over time as they get familiar with the plant. Sales of cannabis concentrate shot up more than 40% last year and accounted for a larger share of the overall cannabis market as consumers became more comfortable with the intricate processes of dabbing, and new technology has made the products easier to use. And so in addition, some consumers are moving away from vape products because of respiratory related health concerns and turning to concentrates such as wax, hash, and shatter, according to industry insiders. So there's more information below if you want to grab the link. But just wanted to share the snapshot. It's a lot of good information just in one clip. Onto this one from Florida, Office of Medical Cannabis Use for the week of January 10th to the 14th, and we can see that Curaleaf opened a new location, and Liberty Health Sciences, which is owned by Air Wellness, also opened a new location. And the patient count did increase up to 661,000, 496,000 up from 658,380 last week, which represents an increase of 3,116 patients, which is good to see, especially as we head out of winter and into the new year. If we take a look at sales from January 7th to the 13th, we can see not in dollar amount, but the amount of milligrams of THC sold, number of milligrams of CBD sold, and number of ounces of smokable flower. So if you're invested in any MSO, you can compare week over week charts to see if they're gaining or losing market share. And one thing I did notice is while at one point VRNO, which runs AltMed Florida in December, had stolen number 2 market share, seems like Curaleaf, with their ramp up and opening many stores to end the year of 2021, has gotten number 2 market share back, and then AltMed's even lost it to Surterra Wellness, which seems to be number 3 for market share. Just wanted to share that one. On to some state news. This one from Marijuana Moment. As Mississippi Senate votes to legalize medical cannabis, defying the governor's veto threat, which we love to see democracy in action. The Mississippi Senate voted 47 to 5 on Thursday to legalize medical cannabis, a move that comes more than a year after voters approved a medical cannabis ballot measure that was later overturned by the state Supreme Court. If the long-awaited legislation, which now heads to the House for consideration, becomes a law this session, a medical cannabis program could be up and running in the state by later this year. Its route to passage, however, remains precarious, as Governor Tate Reeves has already threatened a veto over its proposed purchase limits, which he says are too high, which is insane because this guy knows nothing about the plant, and some other state officials remain wary. But supportive lawmakers have said they're confident they'll have the votes to override any veto, which is great, and push the legislation through. And again, this is good to see, especially in Mississippi, democracy working in action. On to this one from Ohio, as apparently Ohio cannabis activists turn in more signatures for legalization initiative after temporary setback. So just wanted to provide this update as I reported on it Wednesday. But Ohio cannabis activists said on Thursday that they did turn in the 29,918 more signatures for a legalization initiative after the state said their previous submission was insufficient. So now the campaign is confident they have enough to force lawmakers to take up the issue. So now it'll be a waiting game for more news to say that whether Ohio's activists have actually gotten the amount required, and hopefully there's not going to be any sort of challenge for the Supreme Court to say that this initiative was also invalid, but we'll just have to wait and see for that. So I wanted to provide that update. On to this one as well from Baltimore Fishbowl, as state lawmakers move to legalize recreational cannabis. Now we know that lawmakers have said they'll put it on the ballot, but just wanted to provide this update as the House of Delegates is proposing a constitutional amendment that would go before voters in the November election. We know that, but the amendment would allow those 21 and older to use and possess cannabis, but it wouldn't go into effect until July 2023. So even if it is on the ballot, we would not have any sort of law changes until July 2023. So this is an update, new information after lawmakers have crafted rules for its use, possession, and distribution of taxes. Just wanted to share that out of Maryland as we are getting closer. A few other articles lastly to share. This is from Vice. Inside Germany's legal weed gold rush. No one is sure what Europe's largest legal cannabis market will look like, but behind the scenes, cannabis firms are gearing up for a piece of that $3.3 billion market. I just wanted to share this because it's interesting. This is an article from the Canadian LP perspective, but it does not mention any US MSOs or Curaleaf whatsoever. So while you might be getting accurate information in here, just keep in mind that German, adult use launch legalization is still very far away, not until 2023 most likely. And so for that reason, this market is not going to grow very quickly until we sort of have that catalyst take place. So just wanted to share though, because I found some interesting things in here. Protected by barbed wire fences and 24 centimeter thick concrete walls, Aphria RXs, which would now be Tilray's medical subsidiary, Aphria RX's high security cannabis growing facility, is currently producing 1.1 tons of weed for medicinal use each year under a contract with Germany's Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices. So just wanted to jump down to the other interesting bit that I thought was worth sharing. As experts say, Germany's legalized recreational cannabis industry, which would become one of the biggest in the world, will quickly become a multi-billion euro sector. In November, a study by economist Jotas Hokap of Heinrich Heine University found that Germany's annual demand would be 400 tons, which if sold at an average 8 pounds per gram or 10 euros, would value the market at 3.3 billion pounds or 4 billion euros, and that legislation will create some 27,000 jobs. While currently, Germany's medicinal market demand is about 10 tons. So just imagine the potential when they can scale up from just 10 tons to 400 tons. Now keep in mind that's still a long time from now, but that is a big opportunity for those companies that are able to grow in Germany. And so this is businesses told Vice World News they are gearing up in preparation. Demacan, one of the 3 companies alongside Aurora Cannabis and Aphria RX, already producing the national medicinal supply of weed. And this is because a few years ago, these 3 companies were approved by the German government to come to Germany, build facilities, and start growing in Germany so that they can easily supply the German population. Said it's thrilled about the huge growth opportunity and that it can quickly ramp up our production from its growing facility in Dresden. So this doesn't directly say it, but it implies that the 3 companies, Demacan, I think it's a Dutch company in private you can't invest in, but Aurora Cannabis, Canadian LP, and Aphria RX, a subsidiary of Tilray Brands, will be the companies that have a head start as Germany does transition from medical to adult use. Just wanted to share that. While it's also interesting that they don't mention Curaleaf at all, who have not been approved to grow in Germany, but could still have the same capabilities to export to the country. So just found that interesting, but wanted to share this. And then lastly, we've got news as Africa's cannabis market to hit US 7.1 billion by 2023. So there's a lot of fluff in here, but ultimately, where do they get this from? A 2020 report by the research firm estimates that the cannabis market will be based majority in the following 5 countries. Market size would generate as follows if the required legislation takes effect. So they need the required legislations to pass on time, and we know in big bureaucracies that doesn't often happen. But Nigeria, 3.7 billion US, South Africa, 1.7 billion US, Morocco, 900 million US, Lesotho, 90 million US, and Zimbabwe, 80 million US. So obviously, there's a lot of room for error and to say that some of these legislations might not get through, but if it does, that will be, a big wealth creator for the nations in Africa that are seeing the opportunity with this cannabis plant. So lastly, just wanted to share some resources with you. As a Cresco Lab shareholder, I wanted to share this one because I found it valuable listening to this Cannabis Investing Network podcast episode, Building Cresco into the Industry's Partner of Choice, featuring Greg Butler, the Chief Commercial Officer of Cresco Lab. So I did listen to it the other day, found it very informative. Just recommend checking it out, especially if you're invested in MSOs, which would mean you own Cresco, or if you're individually invested in Cresco Labs themselves. And it does give a bit more information on their approach and what they see in the long run as being a wholesaler, focusing more on that approach as opposed to retail, what other companies have done. Well, this is another one from Cannabis, Legalizing the Leaf, Business Breakdown, episode 42. And this is Jeff Hoffman of Marathon Partners Equity Management. He comes on, it's 52 minutes long, but he gives his insight. Basically, he'll just tell you everything I've been telling you over the last year about what the industry's gone through, why this is such a unique opportunity. And just very much worth a listen as well. And so lastly, this one, Whitney Tilson, fund manager, joins to discuss 2022 outlook. And so he's the CEO and founder of Empire Financial Research. I just wanted to play this clip. I honestly did not watch this whole thing, but I watched a good amount. And again, just reinforces the conviction that I've built up over time from following this industry and educating myself for such a long time. But we're just going to play this clip.
But the fact that a guy like me, an old school value guy, just listed my number one stock pick for my newsletter business for this year is the Advisor Shares Pure Cannabis ETF, MSOs.
Boom. So he says it right there. Obviously, he goes into more detail, but as a value guy, that's where he sees undervalued assets in the market. And I've said this many times. If you know of any markets in the US that are growing faster and more undervalued, please let me know in the comments. But I've looked and I can't find any. So that's why it's very difficult to find anything else besides this opportunity. So just wanted to share this too, as many other investors and fund managers are also eyeing this opportunity. They're possibly just waiting on certain changes in the back end, like the second tier exchange or some sort of safe legislation that would give them cover fire to allow them to start putting their capital in and investing. And so lastly, just wanted to share this one from change.org, a presidential promise, pardon all federal cannabis offenders. And so on September 14th, 2021, the Weldon Project delivered a letter to President Biden urging him to grant a general pardon to anyone convicted of a federal cannabis offense. The letter was signed by Drake, NBA All-Star Al Harrington, Killer Mike, activist Weldon Angelos, Meek Mill, Mike Tyson, NFL star Deion Sanders, Lil Baby, Glasshouse Brands, and over 150 artists, athletes, law enforcement, business leaders, elected and appointed government officials, and leading advocates. So please join us by signing and sharing this petition. If you wouldn't mind, I did sign it yesterday. You can grab the link below. Now, Weldon Angelos is someone that has spent time in jail for cannabis, and he was actually pardoned by President Trump before Trump left office. And so the fact that it's actually Weldon Angelos leading this one could, because Americans need a good, heartfelt story to rally behind any cause, and this could be exactly that. A former prisoner pardoned for his cannabis convictions, now leading the charge to get clemency granted for everyone else stuck behind bars. And I think that's a story that Biden could possibly get behind. Okay? And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.